Good evening. Notice in the time in the presence of a quorum, I call the October 8th Acton Finance Committee to order. This is being recorded on Acton Public TV. So if anybody's recording this, please make themselves known to the chair at this time. Hearing none, I shall move on. Public participation. Yes, Ms. Fredericks.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I have a couple of concerns that are not related to sewer, but then if you aren't going to let us comment or ask questions after the sewer presentation, I'll have a chance now, or are we going to be able to talk about that later?
Probably not going to entertain questions because, as we've been told by town council, you have the right to attend, but don't have the right to participate.
So you don't plan to allow public to speak after that? Okay.
I was not to keep it as it because it depends how long it goes. If it goes for an hour, no.
Okay, so I have concerns about the interest rate, the cost of expansion. There's a plan to expand, looks like South Acton, the capacity supersizing again by 50% to accommodate powder mill, the 40B down there. And if you don't do West Acton, there's plenty of capacity for that. There's talk about a major plant upgrade that's required, and how would that get paid? That doesn't seem to be entering into the conversation about either the existing users or the proposed users, how that would impact their rates. And then the build-out, we're not getting any answers on what the build-out would be in West Acton. And that's it for the sewer. I was at an Economic Development Committee meeting the other day, and Selby said that he considered housing development as economic development. And I said, geez, I'm pretty sure that the master plan calls for an increase in the commercial base so that the town works to increase the percentage of commercial taxes coming from commercial as opposed to residential. And he said, oh, well, we're changing that definition, the state, this and that. And I said, well, gosh, I thought that was a local policy, and I didn't think that that had been changed, and I was wondering if that had been changed. And so I asked a bunch of people who don't think it's been changed, but I'm bringing that to your attention. Also then, some good news. I think last time I told you about the Water Resources Advisory Committee working on a build-out, comprehensive build-out analysis for Acton. This is after Ron Parenti brought in these charts showing all the towns around us as leveling off in growth, and Acton going like a hockey stick. So this has been some of the driver for the long-term water study, and I'm just reporting that they started that, and they went to the planning staff who said that there had never been a comprehensive planning study, build-out analysis, that they had just taken statistical population numbers from the state, and so it looks like there's a lot of people that are welcoming this, so thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants to volunteer for the analysis, it's going to be a little while to get started, because the first phase is the gathering of what we have, the information, little bits of here and there, and then putting that in folders on DocuShare and whatnot. Thank you.
Any other public participation? With that said, West Acton sewer update from our town manager, Paul Campbell, the town engineer, and I believe David Martin from our Board of Selectmen.
Sure. Hi, good evening. I'm Paul Campbell, town engineer. I'm not sure if I met everybody, but I'm here also. Woodard and Curran, our consultant, Jim Rivard and Jack Troidel here, answer any questions later if you have any. Apologize, I probably should have given you the presentation, but I got it up behind you, so I'm just going to go through a brief overview of the project and kind of where we are today, and hopefully get some feedback from you guys to answer any questions you have. So just want to start. We're going to talk about, some of you might not just be familiar with West Acton and why we're looking at West Acton now, so just giving you a little history of sewers in Acton and why West Acton is coming up. Then we're going to talk about some cost estimates, how we're using an existing model that was used in South Acton for the existing sewer. We're just carrying that forward into West Acton, so I'm going to show you how that works. Talk about the funding sources, Clean Water Trust and their state revolving fund, and a couple interest rates that we got there. And then just to break out what it means to the property owner in terms of costs, things like that. And then just some general project benefits, how West Acton sewer fits into the town goals. So going back in history, sewer started in 1945. There's been on and off efforts to get sewer going, but 1945 is when the Board of Health ordered sewer to be built, and 50 years there's been efforts over time, purchasing Adams Street property, things like that, that kind of got us to where we are now. In the 90s, when the high school campus, they were under consent decree because their septic had failed. So that was kind of the impetus to get the sewer project going for South Acton and Kelly's Corner. So town meeting approved Kelly's Corner, South Acton for the full sewer project in the 90s. And as part of that approval, the DEP required us to do a comprehensive water resource management plan that didn't just look at sewer, but they wanted us to look at the entire town, identify water resource need areas, and kind of come up with solutions for each of rank them first and then come up with solutions. So out of that comprehensive water management plan came West Acton. So here's from the comprehensive water management plan. This plan on the left here, this map, this identified all the need areas in town, and the red areas were the high need areas. So West Acton is, in here with this high need area. And on the map on the right, that's the recommendations for each area, what those areas should do. So some areas said to connect to existing sewer. Some areas they've suggested to utilize private treatment plants, maybe a public-private option or something like that. And then other areas they said to do like a wastewater management district, basically a Board of Health that's a little bit more controlled to help maintain septic systems. So ever since 2006, we've just been implementing the comprehensive water management plan. So, the first area that connected outside of South Acton, Powder Mill down here was the first expansion area that connected the shopping center down there. And then for those of you that were here, 2008, Spencer Tuttle Flint, which was this high priority area here to connect to sewer, that was an attempt to get onto sewer. It didn't get the 2/3 vote authorization. And then the next highest priority was West Acton, and it recommended that they connect to sewer over here. So that's what we've been working on since 2006. So these are just a couple of findings in West Acton from the report that we've just been working on since then. So, most of the lots are limited for septic because of the proximity to the Fort Pond Brook. And over half the parcels in West Acton, they're identified as need parcels. So basically properties where a septic replacement would either be environmentally or economically less viable to put in. So if you have a really small site or you have high groundwater, things like that. The report did talk about Douglas Gates property exhibiting high groundwater. So if they ever need to replace their septic, a moundage field would be likely because their septic hasn't been replaced since the 60s. And then there were non-technical needs. So they identified that West Acton is a commercial center. So that was a non-technical thing identified. So this one doesn't show up that great, but so just relative, so you know what we're talking about. West Acton is this area here. This gray area here is the existing sewer district. So here's Kelly's Corner over here, down Main Street, and so on. So it's abutting where the existing sewer is today. This is our current project area that we're looking at. On Thursday, the committee is going to vote this yellow area in or out of the project. Once we have the final project area defined, that's when we're going to tighten up the cost estimates, and we're going to mail out betterment letters or estimated betterment letters to property owners so they can look at it and see what we're estimating for their payment. And then they're also going to let us know if we have any mistakes on there, because we're using the assessor database right now to let us know what these properties are, whether it's an apartment or whatever. So that's why it's an estimate, So yeah, that's going to happen next week. So this is the cost estimate here. So we're looking at a $15 million cost estimate for the total project. And like I said, we're using the existing betterment model that was used in South Acton. So the way betterment projects work is you take the total cost of the project And then you subtract out whatever general benefits there are to the project that aren't necessarily all related to sewer. So things like paving Mass Ave, that's a general benefit to all the town. So that's something that's paid for by the taxpayers. Connecting the fire station, West Acton Library, things like that, those are paid for by the taxpayers. So once those things are deducted from the total cost of the project, the rest of it's borne by the sewer users. So we're looking at about $11.5 million. That gets spread out amongst the properties that are served by sewer. So right now, there's about 195 parcels. It's a little different than properties, but it comes out to about 330 sewer betterment units. I'll discuss this on the next slide. So this number divided by this number gives us our cost per SBU. So this is the assessment method that I said we're using from the existing sewer. So this is on our town general bylaw, chapter D. And it equates everything back to a single family home. So one single family home is one sewer betterment unit, SBU. So we count up all the single family home properties that are single family homes in the area, and those are one SBU. Then another section of the bylaw, it looks at multifamily units, so condos, apartments, things like that. If you're under 3 bedrooms, you're 2/3 of an SBU. If you're 3 bedrooms or more, you're one SBU, just like a single family home. So we'll add up all the residential properties, get all the SBUs. And then for commercial property, it's based on the lot area and the floor area ratio allowed in West Acton. So depending on your lot area, a developable lot area, and the allowed floor area ratio, this equation spits out an equivalent number of SBU. So, you know, like the Village Works property, they're gonna have, 12 SBU or something like that. So you add up all of those SBUs, whatever the specific benefit, that 11 million, that per SBU is assessed to each property. So if you had a 10 SBU, you're 10 times the 35,000. So talking about financing here, so we're going to utilize, saying just like the original sewer project was done, we use the Clean Water Trust, the state revolving fund. So state revolving fund provides low interest loans for projects that provide like an environmental benefit or clean water benefit. So the current terms right now are 2% for a 30-year term. And Acton as a housing choice community, we're eligible for 1.5%. And then there's an administrative fee. In our cost estimates, we've been using 3%, kind of keep us in line with the school and the fire station, and just it's pretty conservative for this. But there's going to be some costs to the project that aren't eligible for SRF funding. So you have to have your project designed, for example. You can't borrow money from the trust to design your project. So we're going to have to go to other sources for those ineligible costs. So the interest rate that gets passed on to the people, Brian's going to come up with one interest rate that kind of incorporates all of these different borrowing. So for the property owner, betterment, it's their portion of the total project cost. They can pay it off over 30 years with interest or upfront, no interest. They can transfer it to the next owner, but they don't have to connect. So if they don't connect, they can avoid user fees. So it's just a water fee in reverse. And so, the benefit of West Acton too is if we get more users on the sewer, a lot of our fixed costs for the sewer enterprise gets spread out over more users. Obviously, we have some more infrastructure, but it's hopefully a benefit. And then some connection costs when they do connect, whenever that is. There's a small fee for a town. And the homeowner is responsible for a general contractor to do the connection. So these are just some of the business owners in West Acton, kind of, praising the project and what it's going to do for them. A lot of them have plans to expand their business. And then Acton 2020, these are some of the goals that the plan said to do. So West Acton Sewers was a big part of it. So that is that. So if there's any questions, I'll definitely take.
I'll start with Dave or Al.
Yeah, so it's a, can you go back to the slide that has the breakout, 3.5 million general? There, that one there. So 11.5 million are the costs borne by sewer users. What percentage of that is municipal owned?
Of the 3.5 mil?
Of the 11.5?
So the 11.5 is non-municipal, so all the...
Total, okay, so totally non-municipal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, municipal properties they're not assessed betterments. They're whatever the avoided cost of whatever on-site option they would have had. So the fire station, if we had to design and build another septic system, rather than do that, you just pay it to the sewer.
You know, just to expand on that, the general benefit to the town, you touched on the fire station and the West Acton Library is being bettered by the sewer design, and then a lot of it also is the repaving of the roads when they're dug up to place the pipes, and a lot of that would just naturally be done. The roads get older and they need to be refreshed. Do you have sort of a bucket of what that 3.5? And I know we have talked in the past about coordinating with the school schedule and the sort of cost of their septic system, how that could impact in it. If you wouldn't mind, just at a high level, just sort of step through the mechanics of if the school has their estimate now, and then how that may influence the town's general benefit or the cost of the town.
Right. So so the school has an avoided cost that's in that 3.5 million. We use the number that they gave to MSBA for their on-site septic. They have to plan for an on-site option if the sewer thing fails, because their project will just keep moving forward. So we just took their number from the MSBA and plugged that into the general benefit for the town. There's paving, police details. Is there anything else I'm missing? Oh yeah, Housing Authority owns a property, so their avoided cost of putting in a septic system. There's future capacity, so you design a system like this to kind of plan for future things. The original service system was built in a way that could provide for West Acton in the future, rather than have to like pull out pump stations today that we built 20 years ago. You kind of build it in a way that can provide for an extra pump, or, kind of thinking that long term. So you make an extra investment today to kind of plan for the future. So that comes out of not the current users thing, but that's an investment that the town makes. And then that's where we collect privilege fees to kind of pay down that cost of, planning ahead.
You mentioned the sort of fixed costs of the station itself being spread out among more users, the users in West Acton, as being a benefit. And in theory, their service rates could go down if there's, greater usage of the system. But would it be, do you have a sense, would it be offset by the increase of additional capacity that may be needed, so it kind of balances itself out?
I mean, we have a separate offline from this, we have a rate study kind of looking at that, addressing that specifically. But in that $15 million cost estimate is $1 million that the West Acton users are going to pay to the sewer enterprise for the cost of the treatment plant, because the treatment plant was built 20 years ago. And so if you look at what that treatment plant was designed to provide for, it's much more than what is today just in South Acton, Kelly's Corner, So if you divide up what this project is, from that, treatment plant, you come up with about $1 million that the West Acton users through their betterment, are going to pay the sewer enterprise to kind of pay for their share of the treatment plant, if that makes sense. So that's $1 million you didn't have, you know, off the bat. You know.
Gotcha. And this might be more of a question for Mr. Martin, but you know, the select board, when you guys are developing the warrant article for this particular issue coming up for the December meeting, do you have like a high level sense of how that would be? It sounds like, and just these are my words, but it should be a request for the 15 million for the town to spend on the construction of this, and with sort of an explanation of how that would be spent. But the actual mechanics of this is the town would borrow the 15 million, and then 11.5 or so, give or take, would be recouped through the betterment fees over time, et cetera, and then the town itself would, in theory, finance the remainder difference, the 3.5 million or whatever the number is, the entire amount, but they would actually technically just owe the 3.5 despite owning all of it. Is that?
Yes, that's exactly right. And so the article lists the total project cost, and then the funding the general betterment, or indicating in the article that the 11.5 million would be paid off from the sewer enterprise fund, and then the rest would be paid off from general tax revenue.
Great. And there's one last question, maybe for both of you, is just how do you think about the school schedule with developing the designing the twin schools as well as designing the sewer system, and how sort of confident do you feel about the coordination of those two being pretty tightly done to where they can proceed in parallel with each other as necessary?
I mean, I'd like Woodard and Curran to kind of speak on that a little bit, but I know we've been working off of their schedule backwards, so we phased the project in 2 phases so that we could provide the sewer for school first and then the rest of West Acton, but Jack can explain it a little better.
Yep. So it's our understanding that the school is looking for sewer service in the summer of 2020. So we're targeting a substantial completion date of construction of the sewer force main to serve the school sometime in July of next summer. That will include the school building a small pump station, and they'll pump through that force main line. We're calling it phase 1 of the project, and phase 2 would be the remainder of the sewer system. The phase 1 portion has an SRF loan set up. We're actually submitting the final application next week for that funding source. The phase 2 work, we submitted a project evaluation form over the summer, waiting for that to come through on the IUP later this fall, and that would be a separate loan piece to fund the phase 2 portion. But as far as the coordination with the school, we feel pretty good about our schedule to build. It's about a mile of that force main. We should have to cross a small bridge on Mass Ave, and that would be ready for the school. And we would put provisions in our construction contract to address any concerns if the contractor wasn't able to have that system ready, that they would have to provide service for the school on their own dime. So, yeah, we've planned for that.
Great, and just one more is just on the, as far as like the town meeting goes, are there any sort of contingencies that should be thought through? I mean, with regard to the school or this, and the coordination between the two is, it seems like, if the school is approved and this isn't approved, or the school is not approved and this is approved, I mean, is there sort of a sequence of, this could happen, and then sort of a follow-up is, are these both, could the sewer project be accomplished with just a town meeting vote? There's not another vote or anything there's not a ballot or anything like that necessary as far as I can tell.
Right, there's not another vote. It's just the one vote at town meeting. So both projects are being designed so that they can exist without the other. Mm-hmm. In the case of the school, they have to design a septic system. They wouldn't if the sewer was pre-existing, but it's not pre-existing. And for both projects, we don't know what votes will pass, right? Mm-hmm. And we expect the school and everything to be supported, but the school has to pass 4 votes, 2 town meeting votes, and 2 ballot votes. The school amounts to about 4% of this project's budget, or, if I should also say that if the school failed in one town, there is time actually to retake that vote. So there are like 45 days in which to retake the vote. So, but anyway, if the school didn't go forward for some reason, that means the betterments would probably go up by about 4%.
Gotcha. Yeah, and just maybe one last question on the treatment center itself is, a few weeks ago in Finance Committee, we had discussed what sort of other upkeep may be needed independent of West Acton. And is that what you were sort of alluding to is being rolled into this as far as it, or is that sort of a separate project that would need to be addressed in the near term in any case, whether West Acton moves forward or not?
We did a separate project, comprehensive plant evaluation, and that evaluation looked at the needs of the current treatment plant. It's a 20-year-old plant now. Some parts need to be rehabbed or replaced and things like that. But we also had a forward vision looking, so we try to identify future needs in the area. So we have the comprehensive plan that already identified future areas to connect to sewer, so we plugged that in. We thought of other projects that the Board of Selectmen have already approved that weren't anticipated 20 years ago. So we're just kind of having a vision moving out and seeing what the demands are on the system in the future. So, that's a report that was done, and now we're kind of working towards that, but it's kind of like independent. Like West Acton's like part of it, you know what I mean? But it's a separate, project over here. But it's they all tie together. But it's if West Acton dropped off, it would still be in the comprehensive plan evaluation because you can't predict down the future if something comes up. But we're just trying to be prepared for future needs.
But it'd be likely just if West Acton Sewer didn't pass a town meeting that in a year or two at some point you would say we need X dollars just to update the facility to bring it up to whatever standards and so on and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah. Like there's still pumps that need to be replaced and,
Gotcha.
and things like that. It's in that plan evaluation we had Spencer Tunnel Flint, because it's still identified as a need area, and we have to plan for it if something changes, to bring that on. So, yeah.
I have a few more, but I'll turn it over for now.
In a later slide, you mentioned that there might be some other fees involved. You don't have to change it. I was just curious if those other costs and fees will end up being borne by the sewer users or part of the general betterment fees, or will they be split between the whole project?
Oh, so this is just what's the property owner. So the only thing with the project is the betterment cost. All of these are just individual user property.
So your 15 million number, that's the number. That's not going to change overall.
Correct, yeah, like it's subject to, we got to put this out to bid and things like that, yeah.
Right.
But the current estimate, yeah, is a $15 million project.
Okay, all right. When you have had public forums, what has been the response from those who are going to be hooked into this system, or at least have it available?
You get mixed, both ways, but I would say most of the feedback we've been getting is people that are outside of that area that want in, and they're disappointed that they're not in, Once people kind of explained, when I showed them other quotes for septic replacements that ranged anywhere from $27,000 to $45,000, once you kind of accept that you have a liability on your property of the $35,000 betterment, it kind of clicked in people's head like it's something you can plan for, something you can manage a little bit better than if your septic up and failed or you wanted to sell your house and didn't pass Title V. So I'd say the feedback we're getting is pretty good, so, yeah.
Thank you for answering all of my many emails
Oh, yeah, no
about
problem.
this in general. You talked about a sewer upgrade needed. It sounds like I've been hearing about it for a few years, so I imagine that's coming soon.
Yeah, I don't know what the future plan is for that, but,
Does that add on to the betterment fees, or is that part of
No.
the usage fees?
We have a separate rate study, kind of figuring out what the rate should be moving forward, but it's not in the betterment. Betterment is the construction cost of this project.
Okay, so that would just increase the usage fees for anyone who is using the system.
Possibly. Like, I don't know what the fee structure is going, we're doing a rate study to plan for future things.
But it wouldn't be the general taxpayers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you said you plugged in the numbers that the school gave to the MSBA for what it would cost them to build a septic. At what point was that number chosen? Because my understanding is that it has swung from $1.5 million to $500,000 to back to $750,000.
I think that, go ahead.
The number being used is the number that was submitted to the MSBA.
The most recent number?
There is only one number submitted to the MSBA, and that's in 550,000. And that's the final number that's set.
That's, okay.
The project cost as far as the MSBA is concerned is, they haven't approved it yet, but it cannot go up at this point. So if the septic system cost more to put in, the school project would have to cover it out of its contingencies.
Okay.
The septic system that's been designed, they're planning for a variance from the DEP. The DEP wants our Board of Health to recommend or not the variance. Our Board of Health, I don't want to speak for them, but in past practice has asked for a more robust system when they've had to grant a variance to Title V. They may do so here. They haven't had a vote yet. They had one hearing on this. They're going to have another. So it's possible that the cost of the septic system could go up.
I did not have an answer for this last time I asked. What is the cost of retiring an old septic system?
I can say one thing that's often included in when you contract with a contractor to hook you up. You can have included in that fee crushing your system in place, which is usually allowed, but that you have to get. That also requires the Board of Health looking at that. So that's my understanding.
This has been sold to me as a homeowner in West Acton as what it would cost about to replace a septic system. I don't want to pay for it right now personally because I don't need a new septic system anytime soon, and we have a whole bunch of significant tax hikes coming right now. What I don't know is what it will cost to get rid of that septic system. Is that going to be another $30,000 charge, in which case this is much less attractive. It's not just the cost of replacing my system.
No, it's nowhere near that cost. It's probably measured in hundreds of dollars.
Okay.
So if you pay, well, I'll just say 1,000, right? So if you pay, let's say, $8,000 or $7,000 to hook up your system to the sewer, your house to the sewer, it might cost you $1,000 more than that for them to crush the tank. But of course, that varies a lot on, first of all, what the Board of Health, if they allow you to crush it in place, and the situation, right? Everybody's property arrangement is different.
What is the general zoning in West Acton in terms of buildings per acre, per lot?
So you're asking what's allowed in?
Yes.
So the floor area ratio allowed in West Acton is a 0.7. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can get 7,000 square feet of space, floor space. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, or if you're asking what.
So my issue is that a lot of the area you're covering right now in West Acton is actually a historic district. And what has limited a lot of the breaking up of those historic lots is the fact that most of them can't pass a perk test for multiple units. So you start putting sewer down Windsor, how are you going to, how are you going to? There's a good chance we're looking at a lot of those historic houses not getting destroyed themselves, but other ones being put up that we can't stop. I'm not talking about 40Bs. I'm talking about totally legitimate development.
So yeah, you're still limited by zoning and historic, you're still limited by those things. The sewer doesn't change.
Well, that's why I want to know what sort of increase are we seeing in this area potentially of development?
I mean, Sal's Auto is like the biggest property that is underutilized, but, you know, like Tara said earlier, we don't have build-out numbers or anything, but you're just, in terms of, you know, what could happen in the future, it's limited by zoning, so, you know, like, it's whatever the zoning allows and all
Well,
those restrictions.
that's why I was hoping you knew.
Yeah, no,
That's why I asked.
I don't know that answer, no.
You said that, okay, sorry, talked about that. What is the general life of the system that we're paying a betterment for? I know my septic will last, my understanding is about 30 years or something is the idea. Is there, in my mind, ideally, I get the sewer, I pay for it over the 30-ish years, and then I don't have to pay for that again. I understand paying for usage. Is there another, this pipe needs to get replaced, so you pay a betterment again?
I mean, there's maintenance involved with any sewer system, but, you know, the hope, if it's properly run, is you're trying to plan for future things through user fees. So I know in the current fee, some of it goes towards a capital, like, you know, planning for future, you know, capital. But that's why we have the rate study going on, to making sure, it's more of an art than a strict, you know, equation. But it's making sure that what you're charging as a user fee, some of that is planned for capital replacements in the future. So you don't have to go through another, you know, betterment project or anything like that.
But that's relatively maintenance level, not the expansion of the plant, et cetera.
Correct, yeah. So like expanding of the plant, that's a totally different project that we looked at in the CPE, but just replacing, you know, things that are falling apart, that need to be rehabbed, replaced, things like that. You want to manage it so that you're charging a correct fee to kind of anticipate future capital needs.
And finally, why does this need to happen now?
Just like we said in the project, the Acton 2020 was a goal of Acton 2020.
So because it's almost 2020?
Yeah.
I don't mean to be snarky. We're looking at, with paying for the school, we're looking at significant, almost a 7% tax increase currently projected. For the citizens and homeowners of West Acton, this is a huge jump on top of that. So we're helping the school out, but the school cost was paid for by the entire town of Acton and Boxborough, rather than being borne by this 330 SBUs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I should say, so the 330 SBUs, that's the way we decided to do our sewers, right? We don't, you know, and most communities pay part of the betterments out of general revenue. We decided not to do that.
Yeah.
So, except for the general betterments, all the cost is borne by the people in the district. You know, I would say the biggest reason is for the continued vitality of the West Acton businesses. I can't tell you how many businesses have come to me and say how eager they are for the sewers. So that I would put right up there. The second reason is to keep continued progress on sewering the town. You know, it's a goal that we put in place. We have the high needs areas. This was the highest of the high needs areas. I mean, I think you could ask the why now about any project. I mean, it just comes to it's time when it's when we can do it.
I can tell you why now for two of our other major projects. They have to happen right now, largely tied to funding sources. I'm not hearing a good answer right now, apart from the businesses would like it, for why this project needs to happen at this point in time and not a few years down the road.
Well, I can tell you that the business folks think of it as more urgent than a few years down the road. I mean, if we started a few years down the road, it's done a few years down the road after that. So, that I'm just that's the way the people that have the retail businesses in West Acton think of it.
You showed us the formula for how you figured out a commercial expense for this. Can we talk average for what one of the pizza places would pay or something for a commercial betterment fee?
So I don't have an average of, and I'm not sure an average would give you anything useful.
Okay, what percentage
Of the project
the
is commercial?
11.5 million do we expect to be paid by?
Is it,
I guess I would just say that for a typical typical commercial property, I think it's a matter of a couple SBUs is what on average, the majority are paying. Some of the larger ones are paying in that 10 to 20 range, but I think a lot are less than 5. Just, for order of magnitude comparison.
Because if I took the 330 SBUs that you estimated for the district and divided the 11.5 million by that, I got to about 35,000.
Yep.
That was the number that you had loosely quoted me as being the cost for my house.
Yep.
That says to me that a business would be paying that same amount?
No, business is paying 5 SBU,
Yeah. So who's
so
paying
5
less?
times 35,000.
Who's paying less than me?
Two-bedroom condo is paying 2/3 of 35,000.
Mine is a 2-bedroom condo.
Okay, so you were paying 2/3 of one SBU. So you're 2/3 of an SBU, 2/3 times 35,000, so little over 20,000.
Okay, we're expecting the numbers to come out for people to actually have an idea of what they're on the hook for?
Correct, like, so I said, Thursday, they're gonna finalize the project area, because, the project area changes the cost of the project, and then once we have that final area, we know exactly which parcels are in and out, then we're going to send out letters estimating how many SBU your property is, and what the range is for the SBUs. We have to give you a range too, because we're going to get feedback that the assessor record was incorrected, and misidentified something, so that both the denominator there, the SBU, can go up or down. So we're going to give you a range, and you let us know if there's something incorrect on that. But the final betterment doesn't go out until the project's done. So 2023, when the final contract is paid and the final costs are actually paid for, that's when the betterments start getting paid.
So we're being forced to sign up for something we don't necessarily want or know what it will cost.
You know what it'll cost.
We'll see what happens.
Well, I think there were some very good questions asked. Just one or two basic ones. The 15 million starting point, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good is that number?
Is 10 good, or is 1 good?
And we'll hold you to it.
Yeah, I mean, with sewer projects, especially when they're betterment projects and you're putting the cost back on just the users with some limited, general benefits, you really, you have to get the bang for the buck. Like, we already did that. We got the low-hanging fruit with Kelly's Corner and in South Acton with all the apartment buildings and condos and businesses, So Spencer Total Flint, I wasn't here when it went through, but that being a completely residential area with low density, was a high per household cost, So this, we're trying to get it in the range of a septic system replacement, but we're pretty limited by what the model was in South Acton,
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is that there are other projects that are going to be on the warrant in December that the costs seem to be going up at an alarming rate. So it's nice that we have an anchor in the ground for at least one of the projects.
Yep. I just wanted to add that we're carrying a 10% construction contingency for the project, and between the 2 phases of construction, that's about $1 million. So it's just separate contingency to keep the costs where we anticipate them to be.
Yeah, it almost seems that this is a comment on it's also the price we pay by delaying infrastructure improvements just because we're frugal. If we have put in the sewer 20, 30 years ago when it was needed, we wouldn't be having this discussion today.
Good evening. What was the last betterment on the original sewer?
So in 1999, the last betterment was $12,311.52 per SBU in 1999.
Inflation's a terrible thing. How much is the design cost, Paul? It's not going to be part of the loan.
So it's about a little under $1 million, the total design cost. So last town meeting, we authorized, or town meeting voted for the preliminary design. So we've already expended about $250,000 in preliminary design to this point. So we're carrying that $250 ahead into this. So the West Acton users would be repaying the what we've spent to get to this point today. So it's $1 million total, though. A little under $1 million total, yeah, design.
And the comprehensive study of the existing plant had you're right, a bunch of things, some fairly big numbers, but what are the costs that you're going to have to get done before this thing is complete? I mean, you're not going to hook up a whole new area to 20-year-old pumps and motors, so there's some cost that's going to be prerequisite of getting this done. Do we know how much that is?
I don't think there is an exact number. The plant does have adequate capacity for West Acton. A lot of those costs are, the repair costs that are part of the CPE are reliability based, and to be more efficient. Right now, there's a lot of that equipment is approaching 20 years old, and we have SCADA computers, pumps and motors and other things. As you know, a car doesn't, you've got a lot of repairs by the time you hit 20 years. So it's a matter of replacing those in a more informed manner than trying to just keep the equipment running. So it's looking at the plant overall, saying you have West Acton coming in, what other expansion projects might come in over the next 15 or 20 years. Let's not replace that pump with its exact equipment. Let's put something in that's going to support that future need. But right now, West Acton is compatible, or the system is compatible and has capacity to take West Acton.
Well, I'm not arguing the capacity. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me to have a system that's been operating for 20 years and now we're going to increase its volume and we got 20-year-old motors and things and we're not going to deal with them. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the CPE, like they identified the first phase was like immediate needs that have to be addressed in the next, year or two. So that's.
So how much about was that, Paul?
That was in the 300,000 range. So that's something we're putting into our operating, budget in the sewer that we presented today. And then the upgrades that Jack is talking about, that was on the time scale of 5, 10, 20 years, So it's like, do you want to wait and let things fall apart, or do you want to just plan a project that kind of just takes care of things? But I don't anticipate anything on West Acton kind of forcing anything the plant was designed for those. I mean, the comprehensive water management plan that identified need areas and then said who should connect, it looked at the existing plant and the capacity that was available, and it prioritized areas. So West Acton was already a planned area, 2006.
And so finally, the impact, if the new twin school is not in the system, it's $500,000 lost, and that flows over into the betterment calculation.
Correct.
Depending on who I talk to, I don't know whether the school is in or out. I hear different things, different people. Is there an answer? Are they definitely in?
So from what I've heard from Peter Light, he said that the project's, it's the same to them, whether they're on sewer or they're on septic. I don't want to speak for them, what their preference would be, but Peter has indicated that there's no impact to their project to connect to sewer.
Yeah, but there'd be an impact to our construction schedule and Christie's betterment. And, so when are we going to find out if they're in or they're out?
December 18th. Realistically, to make the call, we need to know whether both these projects are
Right.
Are on the table. And then, then we'll know whether we're actually, making the plans to run that force main by August 1st.
So we don't know.
No,
Right.
I mean, we don't know, but the intent has been expressed on both sides to go and do that. It's not really a part of the school building project, because it's an after-the-fact decision. It's a construction time decision.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any other further follow-up questions? You okay? Sure.
More of a comment, but you had some commentary from the West Acton business owner operators, and it might be useful just to, and I know we talked about this briefly, but just get some EDC input and maybe have that fleshed out a little bit more, is just understanding what it means to, the businesses in West Acton, just to have a little more quantification around it if there is any.
Just so you know, we're holding the Sewer Action Committee's meeting this Thursday at West Acton Village Works. And the first 45 minutes or so will be a forum focused on the effects on businesses. So we are having 3 forums. The last forum was focused mostly on the extents of the project. This forum is focused mostly on the businesses. And the next forum on November 14th will be focused mostly on the costs. I mean, people can ask questions that, whatever they want, but we're trying to focus the conversation in those 3 areas and we won't have the full cost stuff until the last meeting, so that's why we're doing that at the last forum.
Thank you. No more public participation. We already had that. Thank you. ALG spreadsheet. So I think I'm going to let Christie kick this one off.
I wanted everyone to get a chance to look at because I keep talking about the 7% increase in single-family tax bill that we're looking at currently in fiscal year 21. I wanted everyone to get a chance to look at where that comes from and put it all into context. That's pretty much different from everything else because we're looking at the significant debt exclusions coming up. It has been driven higher than I thought of it being previously by the idea of going for the entire bonding for the twin school up front, as opposed to that being spread out over time, which is going to sort of mean higher tax increases over the next few years, but not a huge jump at once.
So you can also see by looking at the spreadsheet that there are preliminary estimates of North Acton Fire Station, the schools, and Minuteman Building Project debt on there, and that under the municipal funding sources, and then also under the allocation of the budget. So it's carrying those numbers through so you can actually see them spread out on this.
If you look at the school assessment change also, this year is the big jump because we're finally reaching what we should have been paying. We're reaching the point where we're paying the 85 to Boxborough's 15. We're no longer getting the benefit that we were given from regionalization for that deal initially. Brian, we have pretty much straight 3.75% expected increase across the lines in the municipal budget going forward. Is that based on historical numbers? How is that number? We're not holding it to it, just where's that number come from?
Well, your timing is good, Christie. So John had a budget we call the Hill meeting today, and frankly, that was kind of a placeholder that we put in there last year. So we're still scrubbing numbers, and we're working with John to make sure we bring in the best number we can possibly bring in, but that's a very preliminary number right now.
But that's just business as usual, not with any specific projects coming up or other expansion.
John is looking at, I mean, like we said, we just met today, we just sat down with all the department heads reviewing budgets. So now we gotta shake these things out, if you would, to kind of see where the numbers fall. But right now, I couldn't tell you whether that number, I don't suspect John wants that number going up. So we're gonna probably do our best to at least try to settle in at that range.
Thanks. Good. Yeah, so currently, as we look at the projections of FY '21, '22, and '23, you'll notice that there's a net negative position for '21 of 1.178, jumping up to 1.81 in '22, and a big jump of 2.969 in '23. And I believe that's once we start really getting into the debt on the fire stations, estimated debt on fire station, school, et cetera, once that, if it passes town meeting and town meeting vote. So we have a ALG meeting on Thursday of this week, so we'll have more of an update at our next meeting. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, the preliminary estimate on the twin school, $2 million. I thought it was going to be higher than that if we were going to go all at once. I mean, our end of it is like $60 million over 30 years. $2 million a year is just principal, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have to pay interest on this thing.
We are.
It seems like the number's a little low then.
Brian, you have any comment on that one?
I can tell you that I know our preliminary estimate for North Acton Fire Station at 550 is probably going to be settling down, but I can't speak to the school numbers at this point. We'll hear more, I'm sure.
You think that will be lower, is what you're saying?
I think our 550 for North Acton Fire Station will be coming down, somewhere under 500.
250? Christine?
So Jason had sent out a spreadsheet earlier that had his calculator for school payments if we did, do a level of funding, and based on a conservative 3% interest rate. And so the school would be paying with interest $4 million in 2021 and 2022 and 2023, and going down a little bit to 3.6 million in 2028. The fire station starts off at 608,000, and then 600, and then 600, and down from there a little. And that, again, that's just using a conservative 3% interest rate, and we're obviously hoping we get well under that.
So did you say $4 million a year? Okay. I thought it was a little.
No, I'm sorry, for the fire station?
No, the school.
Oh, for the school, yeah, 4.
So
$2
million is light,
$2
but
million is off, and why?
roughly $2 million.
Why is the school projecting a 4.23%?
Yeah, let's look for the clarify that on Thursday.
Why is the school projecting a 4.23%?
That's when we start paying what we are actually, our portion.
Sure.
That's correcting up to us paying only,
But-
paying 85%, not the discount we were getting from.
But in
campus.
FY '22, they're expecting that to just disappear?
No, that's just normal increases again. We've been paying less than 85%.
Sure, no,
I can help. Part of the original regionalization agreement, would there be cost transfer for, I guess it was till now, 5 or 7 years, and it was a declining number. It was pretty high in the first couple of years, $1.5 million or something like that, but it's getting lower and lower. And I think the last time I looked, it was around 400,000. So it would account for some increase, not maybe the whole thing.
John?
Thank you. John Mangiarotti, Town Manager. I would just add that both the superintendent and I will be presenting our preliminary budgets the first week of December, and the numbers that are in the ALG plan are just preliminary. They were put in there last year. So I think they're used for financial planning, but in terms of what we think it's going to cost to run the town and the district next year, we hope to present that as soon as possible. But I have to do it December 2nd. I believe the superintendent's doing it also the first week of December, or maybe the second week.
Thank you. I do know that by reading today that the Fed is increasing their balance sheet, and there could be a possible rate cut again tomorrow. Hasn't been decided or voted on by the Fed. So I think we kind of bore that out a little bit with the West Acton Sewer when they get a rate of 1.5 through the state, which obviously is discounted a little bit, but I would think that if the Feds do cut again, by the time we go to bond, that we should be getting lower rates.
Well, I guess my only comment is, if we were looking at a calculated almost 7% increase in the tax bill, assuming a $2 million payment on the schools, then if we're assuming a $4 million payment on the schools, we're looking at a lot bigger than a 7% tax increase.
Exactly. Anything else?
Yeah, you know, one thing just to note about that, the Fed cutting won't necessarily move the long end of the curve, you know, which are already extremely low.
Right.
So, you know, it's definitely wishful thinking, but it's not necessarily going to be the case. The other thing, them adding to their balance sheet, it's not going to be like quantitative easing that we were seeing right after the great financial crisis, right? It's all short end. It's all you know, 3-month bills and that sort of thing. So it's not going to be nearly as
severe.
It's not going to be nearly as substantial as what we were seeing before. You know, they've been dealing with some funding issues on the short end. A lot of the repurchase agreements, the overnight repurchase agreements that are being used for bank funding to one another, to get financing to corporations for short-term financing, has kind of run amok over the last month. And so they've been facilitating that. So this is, what they're going to be doing with the balance sheet is really just a mechanism to try and alleviate some of that. To the extent that it affects the long end of the curve, out in the 30-year, which is where we're going to be borrowing from, it's really tough to say when we're already sitting at 2%, just north of 2% on the 30-year Treasury bill. So, you know, it's tough to say. It's tough to say, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the Fed cutting is necessarily going to impact that. In fact, you could actually make the argument that if the Fed cuts and the long end of the curve rallies and yields go down further, you could actually make the argument that we're heading for a massively deep recession if that's the case. Because if they cut and the curve remains flat or gets more inverted, we're in for a really rocky ride. And borrowing isn't necessarily the solution. Not spending is the solution. So it's it'll be interesting to see, but it's definitely not, one doesn't necessarily impact the other directly.
Thank you. Brings us up to our next meeting agenda item, which is actually the next 2 meeting agenda items, which is the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which I know Mike wanted to talk about. And there is a meeting on October 26th at Bridgewater State from 9 a.m. to 2:30, which is the Association of Town Finance Committee's annual meeting. So I'll let you kick that off.
Well, it's just that the Association of, what's it called? Finance Committee, Town Finance Committees, it's part of the Mass Municipal Association. They offer, there's an opportunity, they have their annual meeting this month, on the 26th at Bridgewater State, and they offer a number of workshops and training sessions and a chance to network with some of your fellow town committees from other towns facing similar problems that we have or experienced. And I just think it's a great learning opportunity, especially for the newer Finance Committee members, just to participate, and they also prepare, now it's online, Finance Committee handbook that explains all the technical terms we need to know about and so on and so forth. I just think it's a worthwhile activity. And Brian has money in his budget for, to send us first class all the way to Bridgewater Estate,
Private jet,
private jet,
helicopter maybe.
limousine, the whole bit.
Do we have to vote to appropriate those funds, or can we just sign up and get reimbursed? How would we access that? Brian?
Brian's not paying any attention.
He's taking notes. If I wanted to attend the Association of Town Finance Committee's annual meeting, and it costs, I think, $59 to attend, could we appropriate funds from our limited budget? And how would we do that? Ask the town manager?
I will ask the town manager.
Thank you, sir.
Usually in the past, it's been a question of pre-registration, and the town paid in advance for anybody that said they were going. Then you have to go, though. It is worthwhile. There's usually several tracks going on. One typically is for new members.
And since it's, I'm not sure if we meet before the 26th again, we should probably do a head count so that we can do a pre-registration and Brian can do the paperwork.
And the other
I,
aspect...
for one, can't go because I'm going to be out of state.
Well, I'm not going. It's my birthday. But anyway, the other opportunities, you get to meet people from other towns, which can be useful. And if I need to say anything else in support of it, many years ago, it is the first time I ever heard the term OPEB. It was one of those.
John Benson, I would certainly recommend you take advantage of the opportunity and attend the MMA's Finance Committee workshop. You may also attend the annual meeting of the MMA, which has a Finance Committee component. I've had a lot of enjoyment over the last 18 months attending the Selectmen's group of the MMA, and you meet with other select board members, and the topics are pretty good, and the exchanges are quite freewheeling. And one of the really good takeaways is it's basically, it could be for youngins and for veterans, but you come away with a pretty good feeling about we're doing a really good job here.
I would love to attend the full MMA, but the fee for that one blows the majority of our limited budget.
It's about $180.
It's 270? What were we looking at?
No, I don't think you have to worry about that.
We only have $500.
No, it doesn't come out of our budget, it comes out of his budget.
I would imagine that's probably built in to the manager's budget, because that's how ours gets paid. The tuition for the annual meeting of the MMA is $180. If you want to go to dinners and stuff like that, I mean, you do have to eat anyway. But I think the add-on fees of the Friday night dinner, the Saturday night dinner, there's a women's luncheon, which I went to last year, was very good. Those are extras, but the basic fee is good. But I would really urge, all of you to attend. It's very helpful.
Thanks, John. Brings us to Finance Committee business. Any updates? Al, liaison reports.
Last night, the select board meeting was probably, at least for my tenure, probably one of the shortest on record, and no real updates financial to talk about.
Cool.
At the last school committee meeting, Peter Light presented on the building committee. Unfortunately, the MSBA is not willing to cover the second stage in the cafeteria. They'll only cover one raised platform, even though it meets the square footage allotment. And so the school is pulling the stage. They're going to come up with a creative solution. We found that there will be no payments towards the Douglas School demolition at all, which I think they had counted on some. No funding of hazmat or asbestos abatement. And so the anticipated $39.4 million reimbursement now is down to $38 million. That should be the final number, which puts us more in that 33.5% rate than the 34% rate, which was slipped from the 35th% rate. So that's of note.
Trustee?
The next Kelly's Corner meeting will occur simultaneously to our next FinCom meeting on October 22nd.
Thank you. Mike?
Minuteman had our ribbon cutting on Friday, and it was attended by myself and the current and former town managers of Acton, and former Selectman Jenna Daci, and the Minuteman School Committee member Pam North. So it was a fun time was had by all. It was a red letter day, and congratulations to the town of Acton and to the region. Mission accomplished.
My 8th grader saw the presentation the other day, and he has already had me submit his application.
Steve?
The Health Insurance Trust met last week, and or was it the week before? Anyway, we reviewed the final numbers for last year. We achieved our goal. Our goal was to lose some money, to take the reserves down. Beyond that, we are moving towards putting some information about the Health Insurance Trust on DocuShare, because up until now it's been a pretty limited visibility operation. That's all being done by our new chair, John Peterson. So, more to come later.
I'm just looking for an email that I received from Mr. Benson on the housing production plan that we need somebody to attend. I know the meeting, I can't attend at 5:30 at night. What is the date of that one, John? Was it October? Was it? Yeah, I don't have the email in front of me. That's my problem. I sent one out to everybody, so. So I'm looking for.
Is this the HPP focus group?
Yes.
It's on November 14th.
November 14th, so I'd like somebody to be able to attend to that at 5 o'clock. So it is?
Yeah.
At 5, so I'd like somebody to be able to, who would like to volunteer to attend that.
I need to go to the sewer meeting.
I think Jason should. Yeah, let's volunteer Jason.
Could volunteer Sahana too. Okay, we will,
I can go.
okay, thank you. We'll see if we can get Jason maybe to go too. By his hair would be good. We do have a set of minutes from our September 10th meeting.
We do, but we don't have, do we have enough people here who can vote on these minutes?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter?
You
Okay.
don't need to attend the meeting.
Okay, to represent okay.
I mean, the absent one is Dave Wellinghoff, and subsequently, oh, there he is. Thought you went home. So why don't we just take a few minutes, look over the meeting minutes, and they'll come to vote on it?
Motion to approve the minutes, September 10th.
Second.
Is there any amendments or any comments?
Can I get to the second and third page, please, for a
Yep.
second? Thanks.
I have a correction on item number 4. Brian, on the second page.
No.
No, we can still discuss it, I believe. This is discussion. So, under some design aspects, second, thanks, I believe that is STEM labs and not STEAM.
It's STEAM, but it's an A. The A stands for art.
Oh, so it is-
STEAM.
Okay, so we can correct that to STEAM? Thank you. I think there's also a correction on number 4 on the third page. Mary, I think, what's her last name? Is Brolin, B-R-O-L-A-N, or is it? B-R? B-R-O-L-I-N, so there's a B-R-O-L-I-N. And I think the note number 5, I think it's Castle, I think it's Castle Booze, B-O-O-S.
Yes, it wasn't Brothers, it was B-O-O-S.
B-O.
Like B-O-O-S, just how you said yes.
There's another correction on that one.
Castle Booze, yeah. I met Mr. Booze on Friday.
Instead of Castle Brothers, it's Booze, B-O-O-S.
They're architects.
Huh?
So we vote to approve as amended, yes?
So do I have,
Yeah, Dave can now
Dave.
move as amended, and I'll second as amended.
Move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
He wasn't there.
What?
Can I say something about that? I looked this up recently, and current interpretation of Robert's rules, as I found it, said that you can vote on minutes having not attended the meeting. You do not simply need a quorum of people who attended the meeting to vote on the minutes. You just need a quorum of the body.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
stick with my abstention.
Thank you. Any other business?
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.